we've got Heather Bhai joining in. So thank you, Heather Bhai. We have Muqtadar's paper now that we all.
Your IPI funding, not Heather Bhai.
So great. So Muqtadar, over to you. We will hear your thing and then come back with questions. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Thank you, everybody, for this overwhelming standing room only audience.
Oh, yeah. I mean, there are enough of us to clap. But just before you start, there is a certain, difficulty now in getting people onto electronic platforms. I don't know if you are facing it, but I am facing it big time here.
No, it is difficult to get Muslims to attend serious conversations.
नहीं वो उसमें
I'm getting 15, 20. I get like 15,000 people watching conversation within 2 hours. So, and most of them are Americans, Europeans, Hindus from India. Muslims are, I don't know what they are, biryani, aqiqa. In Chicago, it's all about Are Jumagi hai Chicago mein ye hai, sorry we missed your lecture. Anyway, shall we begin?
Yes, please. Yes.
All right. Assalamu alaikum to all of you. And this is one of the chapters in the second volume that CDPP and USIPI are producing on having a conversation about India beyond its citizenship. And this chapter was actually originally intended for the first volume. Me and my graduate student, Rifat bint Lutful, we were working on this. And so I think we missed the deadline, and so it's coming in the second volume. But most of the political facts and reality that we were discussing goes up to 2021. And I think that political reality in India is changing pretty rapidly. And so some of those things might need to be rethought. So for example, in 2021, especially within a few months when we were writing, this was after the CAA was passed and the 370 and 35A articles in the Constitution were abrogated, or actually the word abrogated is very wrong. What the BJP did was something very clever constitutionally, in which they redefined the meanings of certain terms in 35A, for example, thereby nullifying the original understanding of those articles and creating a new understanding of those articles. And so it appeared in 2021 that the Hindu Rashtra was continuously on the ascendance. But today, as we speak, we have a BJP Mukt South India, and Narendra Modi, who's supposed to be the most popular leader in the world, is clearly now a regional leader. Even in India, he is a North Indian leader. In fact, if you look at the map of which states are covered, you can see that a majority of Indians are not ruled by BJP today. And a majority of Indian territory is also not under BJP governance. So about 47% of Indians and 47% of land area in India is governed by BJP. So a majority of the country, both in geography and population, is not governed by BJP. But the first thing, the one important finding of our study here that Rifat and I found is that number one, Hindutva's impact is not just through BJP. BJP is just one arm of Hindutva's impact. And so what has happened is that in the last, even before 2014 is the consequence of the Hinduization of Indian society already. The election victory did not make India more pro-Hindutva. India had become more pro-Hindutva. That's why Modi won. So you could say, if you go back to 2007 or 8, you could argue that the society in India had become more and more amenable to Hindutva politics. And then after 2014, Modi has been hitting some of the more symbolic goals of Hindu nationalism, such as building the Ram Janmabhoomi, the Ram Mandir in Ayodhya. And that is a major victory, no doubt. And it is, I think, after decades of campaigning for the ascendance of Hindu identity in India, that was a major victory. So regardless of what happens going forward, I think in the history books of Hindu nationalism, Modi has delivered something phenomenal to the Hindu nationalists by building Ram Mandir. I was reading that a lot of people in India now are unhappy with the design of the Ram Mandir. There are comparisons to the architecture and the what engravings, etc., which were done on Hindu temples, say 1,000 years ago, and the current ones, they're not very happy that with all the technology and all the resources, that lots of people are not happy with the design of the temple. But there are also people who are saying that, look, my mother is about to die, I'm about to die, I want to see the temple before I die. So you could see that apparently it was like a longing for this temple. It kind of reminds me of the Jewish longing for the temple that they've had for centuries, which was the Solomon's temple, which was destroyed by the Romans. So in that sense, this creation of the Ram Mandir, and when it will be launched in January 2024, I think it will be a huge achievement for Hindutva, which means that a lot of people who may be unhappy with the political orientation of BJP by its policies, etc., but as long as they see themselves as Hindu, they will be grateful that this temple has been made. So I have a feeling that it is going to play a big role in the 2024 national elections. But the biggest finding for us is that the society has become very Hindutva oriented, which means that just defeating BJP is not going to eliminate Islamophobia and is not going to suddenly restore secularism and religious freedoms in India. The party that will win, if it is Indian National Congress or a coalition, they will also there will not be a major reversal. There might be some symbolic things like saying, oh, we will ban Bajrang Dal or something like that. But the overall orientation of privileging Hindu cultural iconism, etc., will continue even if BJP is defended. So the challenge for those who want to see a secular, democratic and pluralistic India is twofold. One is to ensure that Hindutva-oriented parties do not capture more and more of the state apparatus. That is, they don't win more elections statewide and don't win national elections all the time. That is not enough, but there also has to be an attempt to de-radicalize the national population, where a lot of tropes, like this Kerala story, for example, even if, imagine those who are watching it in Karnataka today, even with the Supreme Court's disclaimer, it is going to raise a lot of anger towards Muslims. It is also going to raise these false perceptions that Muslims are on assault. They're waging a campaign to convert and marginalize and dominate Hindus in India. So that kind of narrative will continue in the society, whether BJP is governing Karnataka or not. So you can imagine that on the national level. So that was our most important finding, I think, that the Hinduization of the state and society is taking place, which means both politics and culture have been impacted by Hindutva to a great degree. What it does to us is that it gives depth and resilience to Hindutva preferences. So even if BJP is defeated, those preferences are not going to disappear. So an example of that is the Aam Aadmi Party. So what if Delhi is not ruled by BJP? What's the difference? The second point that we wanted to make was that often parties which are secular, who have governed India for a long time, have not really succeeded in embedding secularism deep into Indian culture. when we talk about secularism in India, there are contradictory views. So you might even catch me saying India is a very secular country and so on and so forth, and then you will say that India is not. So there is a peculiar nature of Indian secularism, which somehow allows the state to be very religious. So religious ceremonies are how state conducts a lot of their business. But to a great extent, the state does not impose any particular religious laws on someone else and others. So the religious freedom, which is enshrined in the Indian Constitution, is the source of secularism, not governmental practices in that sense. So we have to understand that secularism does exist in India, but in a slightly peculiar way. But the victories of Bharatiya Janata Party, successive one, 2014, 2019, with majorities which allowed them a lot of freedom to pursue politics, has steadily eroded from the state as well as from society the separation between religion and politics. So, for example, in my latest conversations on Karnataka, I shared a clip of Narendra Modi addressing a huge audience in Karnataka, and everybody is screaming Jai Bajrang Bali, Jai Bajrang Bali. So, I mean, that tells you that the state is not very secular, where religious symbolism is used as campaign slogans. And I mean, you can't imagine even Donald Trump or Joe Biden screaming, long live Jesus Christ Zindabad, those kind of slogans in American politics. It would be like a shock and unthinkable if something like that happened, but both countries are supposed to be secular and democratic. So, so there seems to be an acceptance of this. So people will argue with me saying that India is secular, and when I show them this video, they're not perturbed by it at all, because they have in their head a kind of secularism in their mind, which seems to accommodate this. And that is, to me, very interesting. I think it deserves the secularism that is culturally Indian needs to be thrashed out theoretically first, and then perhaps CDPP can actually have a book on secularism in political theory as opposed to secularism in practice in India. I will contest if anyone says India is not secular. I will disagree with that statement. But if you look at lots and lots of things, not even this, the fact that Ramayana and Mahabharata were shown on Doordarshan, they were produced by state funding and shared by the government. That's not secular indeed. But then there are other Islamic things that are also done by the government, which would not happen in a secular state. So I think there is a need. We did address this briefly, but it was outside the scope of our chapter to delve theoretically deep. There are people who have done a lot of good work, like Sabah Mahmood and Talal Asad, on secularism, but they are looking at it in the way the West talks about secularism, or Western political philosophers talk about secularism, which is very different. We looked at the Indian Constitution and we found something very interesting. Frankly, there is nothing missing in that from an Indian Muslim perspective or minorities, Christians, etc. If they looked at the Indian Constitution, they would not say, oh, this is missing. Because if you look at the article, it protects religious freedom, it allows minorities all kinds of opportunities for educational institutions, for preserving their culture, even preserving their language. The complaints that Muslims have about Urdu not being prevented, that the state is not investing in Urdu, the state is not spending money, the state is not doing this. But the state is also not stopping Muslims from spending billions of dollars in Urdu. Give $10,000 scholarship to every student, but you don't have those resources. So if you go to Isaiah Berlin's concept of freedom, there are negative freedoms and positive freedoms, which means negative freedoms is that the state does not prevent you from doing what you want to do. Positive freedom is the state actually facilitates what you want to do. So as far as India is concerned, the negative freedom aspects are constitutionally very, very good. That's why I think Asaduddin Owaisi is perhaps the most constitutional, pro-constitution politician in India, because he understands and recognizes that the constitution as it is today, in spite of 2 terms of BJP, is still a very good liberal and democratic constitution. However, when you look at the society, then there is a huge contrast. Let me give you an example. So let's say that I give you a jar of strawberry jam, a jam that is made with strawberries. So you look at the ingredients there, ye to strawberry jam hai. But when you taste it, it is Karela jam. So India is like that. You look at the Indian constitution, it's a secular, liberal, democratic, socialist state. But when you look at the politics of India, then you begin to say, hey, wait a minute, where is the secularism? And it's also not very socialistic. It has become extremely right-wing because BJP is a right of center party when it comes to economic issues. It is more interested in corporations, Adanis and Ambanis, than it is in farmers and people who are on the lower economic scale. So while the constitution is secular and socialist and democratic, the society and the state are becoming majoritarian, authoritarian, and also conservative and more pro-business friendly. And they're proud of the fact that they are a business-friendly government in a state which is socialist in its constitution. So there is a huge disparity in this, and it is an indication of the weakness of the Indian judiciary, as well as Indian civil society and the Indian media, that this gap exists. This gap between the constitution and the political reality can be bridged if you have a judiciary which will seriously attack any laws and any policies which are unconstitutional. So for example, the Hijab Ban Act of Karnataka, it makes very clear sense intuitively that in India, if you look at the Indian constitution, there is no way a religious practice can be banned. And it does not matter whether Islam advocates hijab or not. It does not make it irrelevant of that. But the debates about what is the essence of Islam in the courtrooms, etc., this is none of the business of the court. As long as the constitution says people have the freedom to practice their religion, and if their religion does not include human sacrifice, etc., there is nothing that the country can do. But the way the law, it has still survived by saying that schools make laws. Schools cannot make rules which are unconstitutional. My 20-year-old undergraduates got it right away. It took me like 10 minutes while discussing this issue in class for everybody to understand. So like University of Delaware cannot make a rule which is unconstitutional. So this defense that, no, it's the rule about the school. So that's the point I'm trying to make, that the constitution is secular, democratic, etc. But the reality is not, because the civil society is weak and the courts are also not strong. And the reason for that is the Hindutva capture of both the civil society as well as the judiciary system. But if you were having laws made in the country, which I think due to Hinduism, what they are doing to Islam, like hijab ban, then I think you will suddenly find that the civil society is very strong and the judiciary is also willing to act very quickly. So for example, if you ban Hanuman Chalisa from being recited on streets, I don't think any ban like that will be upheld. The courts will immediately turn it around, etc. So the reason why the civil society and judiciary are strong, they are strong in pro-Hindutva issues, but not strong when it comes to democracy and secularism in the country. And that is because of the Hindutvaization of the society. And I think that is more dangerous than BJP winning elections. What we did in this is we looked at the state of Muslims in India before 2014, then post 2014, and post 2019. And in those three periods, we found that essentially this is the RSS trying to equate being Hindu with being Indian. And that is what is the whole agenda, is India is Hindu, and every Indian is Hindu, and every Hindu is Indian. It is something like that. It is very similar to the idea of Israel, where in fact, Israel is way more advanced than what RSS is even imagining. If anybody can prove that 1,000 years ago, one of their mothers was Jewish, they will get Israeli identity. So India might at some point do that, but at least that is what they're trying to do. But what is interesting to me is that in trying to equate India with Hindu, I think RSS is willing to dilute both the concepts. They're willing to dilute what it means to be a Hindu. So you could be a practicing Muslim as long as you say, I'm an Indian, you are a Hindu. So in that sense, they are diluting the religious component and this element of what it means to be a Hindu. And then they're also diluting the democratic and equality component of what it means to be an Indian. So in their desperation or eagerness to equate the two, they are diluting both aspects of it. In the first term, I think the only major Hindutva kind of policy that Narendra Modi came up with was the Triple Talaq, the 2019 Act of Women's Marriage Act, or whatever it's called, in 2019. But that was part of the first term. And what I think it did was, it does not make, banning Triple Talaq does not make a country more Hindu Rashtra. There's nothing about banning Triple Talaq, which is Hindu, and so making it. But what it did was essentially one favor with Hindutva voters, and so basically helped mobilize them so that he could win again in 2019, in spite of having disastrous economic policies like demonetization and GST, etc., which caused a lot of damage to the country. So in spite of having failed governance to some extent, he was able to win the elections because he gave, there is a hunger among Hindutva activists to do something bad to Muslims or do something good with regards to Hinduism, build a temple or do this or bulldoze Muslims' homes. And that hunger was satisfied to a great extent by the Triple Talaq thing. And I think that opportunity came because of, I'm not going to use academic euphemisms, just stupidity of Muslim mullahs. Muslims should have reformed that long ago. Many Muslim countries do not even recognize Triple Talaq as a valid Islamic principle, and I don't know why Muslims were fighting to it as if it is part of their core identity. But they did give a victory to BJP. From a counterintuitive perspective, while we do see that BJP's policies are undermining Muslims, reducing their freedoms in some extent, and there are two other things which they do, which they did in the first term, is empower non-state actors to indulge in violence against Muslims. So in the first term, you saw a lot of cow lynchings, vigilantism, and a lot of gundagardi, basically. And then these people who would then commit violence against Muslims are protected. In fact, there are Hindutva leaders, BJP members of the parliament and state politics who take photographs with the cow vigilantes, etc. So we saw that kind of thing, but harassing a minority does not make a country irreligious in some, like in America, African Americans are treated very badly. It doesn't make America a more Christian state. It doesn't even make America a more white state. So those are, I think, electoral tactics of satisfying the hunger of the Hindutva base to do something like attack Pakistan or beat Muslims up. And that keeps the fervor for Hindutva parties on, but it does not make India more Hindu, it just oppresses Muslims. But the third policy, which was erasure of Muslim culture and identity, renaming cities, renaming roads, renaming gardens, etc., that is a very in some ways a sinister policy, because ultimately our finding is that BJP government is achieving two things, or in partnership with RSS, obviously. They are trying to remove Islam from India's past. It is as if Islam doesn't exist. So if you read history books, I mean, if you have 3-4 more terms of BJP, then probably Indian books will not talk about the Muslim rulers or anybody else. Even there, they are mixed. So they don't want to talk about the Mughals, but then they also want to talk about how Muslims came and conquered and looted India. And so they want to demonize Mughals, and they also don't want to talk about Mughals. They have to make up their mind what they want to do. But the idea is to remove Islam from the past and make Muslims in the present invisible. So this whole talk of Ghar Wapsi, there are more and more at the vendor class, for example, there are Muslims apparently who are changing their names to sell vegetables in non-Muslim territories. So I go on some shows now which are hosted by Indian Muslims, and before the show starts, they will say Assalamu alaikum, but when the show starts, they will say Namaste, Dr. Muqtedar. So to me, it's very awkward that the two Muslims and the greeting is Namaste. Yeah, I can say, I mean, I do say Namaste to the audience, but if the host is Muslim, I wish them salam. So there is this Hinduized culture that is taking place among Muslims who are assimilating into these emerging Hindu Rashtra. And you're going to see a lot more of that. I now listen to UP's mullahs, religious icons speaking fluent Hindi, which is very good because it gives them more power, I'm sure. But it is kind of a disjuncture when I see the big beard, the red beard, and the cap. And instead of hearing fluent Urdu, I'm hearing fluent Hindi. So that is interesting. I'm not saying it is positive or negative. It is definitely positive for the individual who is able to do that. For those of you who are interested in cricket, go and listen to Zahir Khan, who used to comment a lot on Cricinfo's TV. So if you look at him in the beginning when he started, he used to speak English and Urdu. And then he's become so fluent in Hindi over a couple of years that he's inventing Hindi words for graphs and charts. It's very interesting. So because that increases his range. So that doesn't mean that Zahir Khan is becoming Hindu, but it does definitely mean that he's becoming Hindiized. And that is part of the Hindutvaization of Indian society. So there is that impact taking place. In the second term, of course, this is the golden age of Hindu nationalism, with the 370 removed, Ram Janmabhumi's land, Babri Masjid's land given to the Ram Mandir, the beginning of the Ram Mandir, the internalization, the internal annexation, you could say, of Kashmir. All of this are clearly some of the biggest achievements. In fact, besides Kashi and Mathura, there's nothing else left in terms of iconic goals of Hindu nationalism. So in that sense, you could argue that from a cultural perspective, Hindu nationalism is being very, very successful. And politically, of course, their desire to all the time rule India is not going to be successful, but I think that they have moved the needle so much to the right that the entire public sphere in India is on the right. So it doesn't matter whether it's Aam Aadmi Party, and to some extent even Congress, they are all going to be far more. It's like saying that BJP is dark orange and all other parties are light orange. So there is light saffron, dark saffron. There are very few to the parties to the left. And that is one of the big achievements of RSS, and it will continue. I also think that India is growing. India is doing phenomenally well in many ways. Yes, there is high inflation, there is unemployment, but the country is much better off. There's a lot of money in the society, and the data that we see of Indian Muslims also is much better, both from an educational perspective and financial perspective. If you compare Hindus and Muslims, obviously you see that the gap is increasing. So Muslims are not growing and not developing at the same pace as Hindus are in India. But if you compare Indian Muslims to what they are today and what they were, say, 30, 40 years ago, you will see significant development. So there is a development trajectory of Indian Muslims. When you look at Indian Muslims, they lag behind. And in fact, if you were to compare to Indian Muslims with, say, in the neighborhood with other Muslims in Bangladesh, Pakistan, etc., I think Indian Muslims are doing reasonably well. So Muslims should keep that in mind, that as India rises, so will they. Now they just have to make sure that they are not always at the bottom. If they are on the bus of India, they should not always be in the back seat. Occasionally, they should get their turn to drive the bus too. So that is the challenge for Indian Muslims, to keep up a pace of growth and development with them. But, and this is where I guess most of you might not be very happy with what I'm going to say now, is that the rate of reforms within Hindus is also at a much higher pace than Muslims. And so there are internal Muslim barriers to Muslim development too. And because Indian Muslims are not reforming and adjusting to the new realities of the world at the same pace that Hindus are adjusting, they're also lagging behind. Yes, the state is facilitating the growth of Hindus much more than it is of Indians, but Indians are also dragging themselves down. Indian Muslims themselves are dragging themselves out. One last comment before I turn it to question and answers. 2024, I think the two key strategies that the Bharatiya Janata Party is going to do is, one is going to have a much more jingoistic evocation of the Uniform Civil Code issue in the Constitution. It's a directive principle, but the directive principles in the Constitution also say that everybody should be provided housing. Instead of providing housing, this government is bulldozing existing homes. But the second thing is going to be a discussion about caste system within Muslims too. So the idea is to divide Muslims into upper caste, lower caste, and try to get Pasmanda Muslims to vote. Even there, like the way they deal with the Mughal, it's part of the history, they're not very clear. If they really want to divide this, then instead of taking away the 4% reservations in Karnataka, they should have doubled down on it and given more reservations to Pasmanda Muslims across the country. And if they are right, that a large majority of Indian Muslims are backward class Muslims and victims of upper class Muslims, then empowering them would definitely be a great electoral strategy. Sometimes some smart guy in the RSS movement is going to say, you know what, we have to get over our prejudice against Muslims in general and really provide a genuine benefit to the backward class Muslims, the Pasmanda Muslims, and give them something concrete. And I'm sure that will divide the Muslim world. So those are the two issues I think which will contribute. But these are not strategies which make India more of a Hindu state. These are strategies which polarize the society and create Hindu and Muslim vote banks. I'll stop with that.